So this is going to be part 2 of the safety, and it's kind of funny. The reason why I was saying do a safety check is I was watching part 1 and I kept looking and I was like, is that a missing tooth on my on my on my gear? And sure enough, I looked at it, and I don't know if any of y'all saw it or not. Let me see if I can get around to it. Let me see if I can show you again. There we go. So this is why if you crash, if you do hit the blades on the ground, if you do anything like that, check your belt. Make sure you're not missing a tooth. Check your, I don't know if you can see that now. Let's see. A big old space. A big old gap. I would like to know if y'all know what's going to happen if I keep flying it like that. What's going to be the effect? So if somebody knows, comment. I left in a comment that you really need to check the end play here. This is what I meant by that. That was kind of a crazy first video. I was just kind of I don't make too many videos. I'm out at the field teaching. But you need to be able to move this and make sure there's no end play in there. If you do, you're going to need to put a spacer in there somewhere. And over here, you need to put a spacer in there. That way this mesh is proper, right? And then earlier in the other video, I called that nut a screw, but it's a nut. I think it's made out of brass. You want to check all this. You want to check these links over here. No, make sure all these bolts are tight. You want to make sure that your tail shaft here is perfectly straight across, 90 degrees, right? You want to make sure that's level. It's not turned one way or the other. Same thing when you come over here to your tail servo. You need to make sure when you turn it on that your tail servo is pretty much, straight up and down. And when it's straight up and down, that you're about centered on that tail shaft. So it should be centered from both side to side, from here to here. Should have the same amount of distance. That way when you do go left and right on your rudder stick, you're going to have equal amount of gap. It's not going to bottom out on one end and the other end have a huge old gap. So just make sure everything's tight. And then last thing would be on a well, let me go back to this. So if you're running a belt, the proper way to do that is hold the blade grips, and while you're holding the blade grips, turn this towards the prop, towards the wash, and make sure that when you turn it like that, you don't hear that belt skipping, right? You should be able to put a little bit of force on it like that, and hold the main head, and it shouldn't skip, and then your belt's okay. If it skips, it's too loose. When you go up in the air and you do any kind of hard maneuver, it's going to bust loose on you, and and then your tail's going to blow out. So make sure you check that. This is torque tube, obviously. And then, so I would say over here, also if you have one of these big helis, make sure your pinion's tight. And then I'm going to come over here, I'm going to set it down on its end. Hold on. Make sure you got make sure you got no missing teeth on your main gear, right? Or on your tail gear, on the bottom gear, right? And you see that torque tube, that tail, connect to these umbrella gears in here. See that? See if I can get a good picture. See those gears in there? Make sure those gears that go to the torque tube also don't have any missing teeth. These hold up pretty good. Years ago, a line showed their tail digging into some wood with this new gear, and so if you crash these, they pretty much hold up sometimes, depending on how bad you dig the tail in the dirt. But as you saw in that other video, the first video, you could see I was missing that big old hunk of tooth. So I'm curious to know if somebody knows what's going to happen if I leave it like that, because there is something that will happen. Okay, that's about it. And then also in the comments I said turn your blade grips perpendicular to the boom. Turn them perpendicular like that. And then it's going to be hard to do. I need to make some kind of setup so I can put this on my hat. But basically you're going to put your finger on each side of this blade grip bolt, right? And you're going to lift up. You're going to lift up. When you lift up, that your heli should just be a little nose forward, right? You might not think so, but that center of gravity matters, especially when you're going full speed. So you're going to get some porpoising. So make sure you adjust your battery and move your battery accordingly, you know, front or back, depending on where you're either tail heavy or nose heavy. And then also, I guess I was leaving in the comments to make sure you pull up on your main shaft, make sure there's no unnecessary slop. You don't want it too tight, right? Some that have that collar on there, this one doesn't, but some that have a collar on there, if you put the collar too tight, you're going to start messing up that bearing in there, right? And it'll go bad. So you want it tight enough, right, where there's no slop. And then after you fly it for about 2 or 3 flights, check it again, because it may loosen up. What else? Oh, and also, so you want to lube all your main shaft before you go fly, because once you go fly, and if it don't have any grease, if you don't have any oil, it's too late, man. It's going to get galled up, and it's not going to run smooth. A lot of guys don't want to put grease. They don't want to get stuff dirty. Put some oil on there. Keep your heli clean. Do proper maintenance on your heli. Make sure these ball links here don't get too tight, and that your swash balls are always tight also. Make sure those are screwed in and, like I said, Loctited. Same thing with these pitch links, you know. Pop them off. Make sure they move freely, you know. They have some sizers you can put in there, some ball link sizers, and get them perfect, but I always leave them a little tight, and they wear in. I just kind of grease them up, and then I always lube my gears. A lot of people use Tri-Flow. I use synthetic brake caliper grease. It's good enough for a slider pin on a brake with those rubber boots. They doesn't need it. Then it's been good enough on my heli. So I use brake pin slider grease, 400 degrees Fahrenheit. It's been working great. That's about it. If you're gonna fly these big ones, you get somebody to help you, because there's been a couple of deaths. One here in Houston, where I live. That was the first one I believe ever happened. And also make sure your swash guide is tight. But and then the second one I believe was in New York. So anything up from a 200 size to a you know, all the way up to 700, 800 size, go over your whole heli. Make sure everything is tight and Loctited, and all your gears have all their teeth, because it's going to be a bad day if you don't. Any kind of help you need, I'm always here to help. So that'll be the end of this video. Alright, thanks. I'll make a flying video probably tomorrow when I get up or so. Alright, appreciate it. Bye.